benefits of these teachings benefit all beings. These mountains and rivers of the present are the actualization of the word of ancient Buddhas. Each, abiding in its own Dharma state, completely fulfills its virtues. Because they are the state prior to the kalpa of emptiness, they are living in the present. Because they are the self before the germination of any subtle sign, they are liberated in their actualization. Because the virtues of the mountains are high and broad, the power to ride the clouds is always attained in the mountains, and the ability to follow the wind is inevitably liberated from the mountains. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This has been a very full week, this past week. And I was thinking how quickly time is passing. It's been a year, roughly, give or take a month, that we've been navigating this new world that we live in, which isn't really new, of course, but I think is showing us in starker ways, perhaps in clearer ways, all the many ways in which we are interconnected, in good and difficult ways, good and harmful ways. And it's showing us all the places where it's clear there's still a lot of work to be done individually and collectively. And I was thinking how, with a pandemic, we've had to turn in to protect ourselves and to protect each other. But we also, because of technology, because of social media, of course, we have unprecedented access to what is happening everywhere at any time. And I think that is both a gift and a burden. Imagine being in lockdown without the benefit of the internet. I mean, that would be very lonely. And yet our modern world, the ways in which we're living now have their own brand of loneliness, right? That technology is not able to assuage, or in fact, quite the contrary, perhaps really exacerbates, this sense of isolation, or this sense of life being better, somewhere else. And so, every week I reflect from my little Brooklyn apartment. I mean, I was thinking about that, how strange it is in a sense. I mean, I'm doing this from my bedroom. And that is, well, it is what it is. But it's certainly different for me. And as I sit in my apartment and I go about my life and, do my work and do the things that I do each day, I'm always reflecting on what's the best way to use this time that we have together each week. What is the most useful, hopefully inspiring in some way, way to speak about our lives. Certainly to speak about the Dharma, to speak about the Buddha Dharma, and how that can help us navigate all the many storms, small and large, that we are really always in the midst of, but certainly now, certainly recently. And I'm never quite satisfied with what I end up with, but I think that's just part of my DNA. I'm beginning to realize, being not perpetually, but often dissatisfied, is certainly an edge I've come to see. Certainly an edge for me because, we've spoken about that gap between reality and desire, that gap between where we are and our aspiration. And, that is there. And I think that is always, I mean, that's healthy. That's as it should be. In order to grow, we need to grow, right? We need to reach. And then there's also an element of just plain dissatisfaction. And I notice both. I can feel both in me. So there's that. But then there's also, this question that I have brought up before, and which was very alive for me this past week. How does Buddhism and does practice and how do these teachings really on the ground, truly help to deal with all of the different challenges that we're facing. And I very much, I personally feel, the urgency of time, my time and the world's time. And of course, my own time, my own life I mean, it's a blip. It's a drop of a drop in the ocean of cosmic time. But of course, this is the time that I have. And so the question on my mind is, how do I best use it? Because there is so much that requires attention, that requires care and love and knowledge and effort. And so I ask myself, what can I do? What will I do? What do I have to offer in the midst of what seems to be an increasingly precarious situation? What skills, what knowledge, what enthusiasm? Because zeal, enthusiasm, just, is one of the paramitas, one of the perfections in Buddhism, one of the great qualities. And I think more than ever, we need great enthusiasm to do what needs to be done. And I've been watching. There's a summit, a conference that's been happening all week called Black and Buddhist, and I've been watching the talks. I'm not always able to do it live because they're happening in the middle of the day, but I'm watching them afterwards. And in one of the panels, one of the speakers brought up that question. What is it that you can do that nobody else can do? What is that configuration of circumstances and skills and inclinations, that each of us have that we can offer to the world? And of course, I know one of the things that I can always offer is zazen, right? A space where we can come together for stillness and silence. A place to stop and to look and to really listen deeply to what I've called our own wisdom, which I really feel is no different from the earth's wisdom. So it's not our knowledge, not our information, but the wisdom that is based on truth, right? That is based on reality, on the common ground of the goodness, the kind of the basic goodness that we share. That too was something that one of the speakers, Dr. G, her name is, was speaking about the ground of, she didn't call it the ground, this quality of basic goodness, which, at times we could really doubt, is this really who we are, given the evidence? But I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't think that was there, if I didn't think that was true. I think we can also offer each other a place of understanding, right? Because on any given day, at any given time, at least one of us, probably more, will be struggling in some shape or form. And I would like to, be part of creating a space that is where that is not only okay, but that is acknowledged, right? That when we say that life is suffering, that as practitioners, we recognize that is true. And it's not a bummer per se, it's just how things are. I mean, it's just how it is. And if we can start with that acknowledgement, then we can do something about it. And I also recognize, it's the end of the day in the middle of a week, work weeks for most of us, long days for most of us, many of us. And it's not easy. It's not easy to sit and listen and take this in. I mean, at least I'm the one speaking, so it would be difficult for me to fall asleep or to get distracted. Uh, but I recognize, I recognize the inherent challenge in that, and the fact that it is Zoom, and many of us are on Zoom all day. So I know that too. And so in the ways that we can, and to the extent that we can and that we choose to, because I know I've also, as I've made this very open so people can come and enter when they need to and leave when they need to. So there is that space and that freedom. But my hope and my wish is that when we are here together, just even in our tiny squares, that we can do that for one another. We're offering that to one another, this presence, because that's one of the things that I've noticed, in when I'm in spaces that are not primarily white. There's a quality of attention that I've noticed, and it's been very evident to me this past week, that is different. And somebody pointed out to me that this fledgling group is almost 100% white. There's one person who doesn't identify as white, but she can't even be here all the time. And that is, in some way, my failing, in some way, the circumstances, but it's the reality. But then I've, as I said, I've noticed that as I'm in other spaces, there's a different quality. There's a different feeling even to time and to speech. The way that the speakers talk is often very, very considered, very, very reflective. And I can almost feel one of the speakers was saying, her writing is, she said, is channeled. It's really the ancestors speaking through me. And I could really feel that. I could really feel that when she was speaking. And it just made me reflect on how seldom I am in touch, consciously, actively, of my ancestry. There are ways in which I feel the presence of my teachers very much, and of course I invoke them, and of other practitioners, but extending that into to the larger lineage, certainly my family, my country, my history, and the lineage of beings that I am a part of. And so that too is part of what I hope to want to bring in. And this passage, and actually, let me just say before I say that this also, the part where we're in dialogue, some of you may look forward to that. Some of you may be like, oh, enough talking. No, thank you. Um, and I think it's just another opportunity. I've said this before, but I just want to reiterate another opportunity for us to hold each other with a kind of regard, so that the teaching and the practice isn't happening from a podium, right? That is very much a co-creative event, and that the practice is being lived, moment to moment. So even as we're here, each in our spaces, in our homes, and we're also with one another. And so this passage that I quoted at the beginning is, as most of you know, from the Mountains and River Sutra by Master Dogen, 13th century Zen teacher. And as I was asking myself this week that question, what will you do? What will you speak about? I heard my teacher's voice this morning, actually. I had planned a different talk again. And this morning I heard my teacher's voice. I heard Daidoroshi saying, "The mountains belong to those who love them." And he actually has made a recording of the Mountains River Sutra, which is really beautiful. Every time I read it, I hear it in his voice, his deep, resonant voice. And he loved this sutra. The Mountains and Rivers order is named after the Mountains and Rivers Sutra. And one of his primary teachings, besides trust yourself, really give yourself permission to be yourself. One of his other core teachings was that we take care of what we love. And so in the environmental work that we used to do with him, the insistence was really on that, on the developing the deep love and care for the natural world, for the environment, for wildness. He said, because if you do that, if you can get people to love these wild places, then they will take care of them. And this is one of the places where I feel that I'm coming back to, that when I look at the plethora of things that need time and attention, and when I think of, how to use my time and my energy and my resources, what I'm feeling at the moment most pressing is really this care for this body, which of course includes all of it. And I've been doing some writing on my own, that's really looking at the way in which all of these things connect. So when we talk about white supremacy, when we talk about poverty, we talk about hunger, we talk about nationalism, all of it, of course, is connected, is deeply connected with what's happening with our environment as well. And, without a world, all of the other problems become inconsequential. Become non-existent. Just as, without food and water and shelter, we wouldn't be able to sit here speaking about the Dharma as we are now. And so I wanted to use the Mountains and River Sutra just as a springboard, for reflection, for discussion, and hopefully for inspiration, for some kind of action, to take care of this body and take care of this body. And it's really, of Dogen's teachings, is perhaps the most poetic, because I also want, some of his work can just be so difficult. And so I think part of it is looking for those ways to enter. And one way for me is definitely through language, right? Through story, through capturing what is not just a problem or what needs attention, but what is also beautiful. What is beautiful, what is wondrous about our world. And the Mountains and River Sutra really has all of it. And I think maybe I also, as I speak, I wonder if some of it I want to spend time with this teaching also to feel close to my teacher in some way. And though, just to clarify you, so most of you know this if you got the email about next week, but if you had not registered in advance, you did not get the email. So just to clarify that we're not meeting next week. I'm sorry to cancel our meeting, but I really wanted to participate in this discussion that Kozen Greg Snyder of the Brooklyn Zen Center is leading. It's called Undoing Whiteness, and it's looking at whiteness and supremacy, but really how it creates alienation and harm, of course, towards us, people of color, the earth, society in general. And most of it, they have a whole series. It's called the Buddhist Action Coalition. So I encourage you to look it up if you're interested. And most of the talks are Wednesday and Thursday. They have one tomorrow, which I can't do. But I know Kozen personally, and I greatly admire his work. And I really felt it important to do this. So we won't meet next week, and we'll just pick up again on March 10th. If you, you can look this up online, but if you want, you can email me and I can give you the information. And so, I also just want to say, I said, sometimes this work is difficult, and sometimes people wonder, why is this Buddhist? This isn't the Dharma. Dharma is phenomena, and Dharma is reality. So there's no way to stand apart of anything that is happening in our world and say, well, this is not Buddhism's purview. I would rather, to be perfectly honest, I would rather sit quietly with you. I would rather speak of mysticism and contemplation. I would rather, because it's kind of my comfort zone, to be in what's the more academic study, the literary study, of the sutras. I would rather, and is what I had planned originally. I had this passage from Mary Oliver, and it's a very beautiful passage. And I just kept reading the news, and I kept participating in this summit, and I was like, I can't. The world is on fire, and I will include, hopefully, the literary and the academic to whatever extent it feels useful. But I just feel like there's not a lot of time, and there's a need to use it well. And in one of the talks, Jarvis Masters, who's a very well-known Buddhist because he's been on death row for 40 years, very, very humble, very striking practitioner, was telling the story of Thich Nhat Hanh. He studied with Thich Nhat Hanh, one of his many teachers, and he was saying how people think of Thich Nhat Hanh as so gentle, so peaceful. And he said, but there was a quality to Thai that was like a Mack truck. Some of the work that he did in Vietnam, when some of the monks that he was working with and living with was horrific, and he remained and did the work. And so I thought of that too, this need to be both fierce and infinitely tender, gentle. I've told before that anecdote. Bell Hooks tells it in one of her books about love, about a man who asked the Maasai warrior, "What makes a great warrior?" And the Maasai replied, "A good warrior is fearless, but a great warrior is fierce when they need to be fierce, and kind when they need to be kind. And they know the difference. And so all of this is accessible to us to practice with fierceness and with love and with courage and patience and determination. Later in the sutra, it says, that water has these qualities. Solidified, it is harder than diamond. Who could break it? Melted, it is softer than milk. Who could break it? This being the case, we cannot doubt the many virtues realized by water. The many virtues realized by rocks and sunlight and orchids and silver grasses, by the animal wisdom of our bodies and the intuitive wisdom of our minds. All the many virtues that we need urgently to take care of this body. And so that is really just the first line. I mean, I didn't even actually go into the first line, and I'm not going to. I think I'm just going to save it so that we can really start and then continue well. But this is what I wanted to say to you. This is what's been on my mind. Because every moment, as it says, actually, I will say that, as it says here, that first line, these mountains and rivers of the present are the actualization of the word of ancient Buddhas. Kind of like in the Bible, right? So in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And it's really that. God saying, let there be light, and there was light. Well, these mountains and rivers are the manifestation of the word of ancient Buddhas. These mountains and rivers are the manifestation of our words, our thoughts, our actions. The ancient Buddhas are sitting here right now. Every moment of every day, we Buddhas create the world with our words, spoken or thought. That is the power that we each have. That is the power we have collectively. And that is why it's so important to know that that is the power that we have. So, this is a time when many of us are just getting through the days, right? Maybe you are working long days, as I said earlier. Maybe you are helping to school your kids. And there is so much to think about. And so it is not my certainly my intent in any way to add to the burden. On the contrary, is to really look closely, carefully at what it is that we can do, how it is that we create mountains and rivers. So I don't have a profound ending, actually. I don't have a profound ending, so I'm just going to end there.
For more talks, to get more information about Zuisei's upcoming teachings, or to join her email list, please visit vanessazuiseigoddard.org.